Hi everyone, this is Dr. Will Tuttle, and I'd like to talk a little bit about alcohol and substance abuse, which I think is somewhat controversial perhaps, but I think it's a really important thing to talk about a little bit here in our society today. We live in such critical times, and there's an old saying in the wisdom traditions of the world that our mind is our greatest friend and ally, or it is our greatest enemy. And there's so much wisdom and truth in that basic saying. Substance abuse in our society is very understandable because we're all wounded. We're all born into a society that is organized at its core around hurting animals, imprisoning them, and forcing little kids to eat their flesh and secretions, which is devastating to our physical health, our psychological health, our cultural health on many levels. And alcohol as a substance is one of the most destructive of all substances. So very often we find ourselves in a society that is encouraging us to drink alcohol and to abuse other substances. And I want to talk specifically, though, about alcohol because scientists have done research on this, and it's pretty well understood that of all the substances, alcohol is the most destructive to us physically, to us personally, and also when we drink to other people. And there's no other drug or substance that is so devastating and destructive as alcohol. Not heroin, not cocaine, and not methamphetamines, and not marijuana or anything else. Nothing comes really close to alcohol for destructiveness in our society. And I think this is pretty well understood, although it's kind of covered up because it's so approved. And in the vegan movement, I think it's especially important to be aware of this. And I know in the vegan movement we want to be very accepting and accommodating. And one of the big things, of course, we do as vegans is we want to emphasize to people who are not vegans, pre-vegans, that you don't have to give anything up. The food is delicious. You can still drink alcohol if you want and have desserts and so forth. And I have friends who have written books pairing, say, vegan wine and vegan cheese and so forth. So this is understandable. We want to encourage people to move away from eating animal-based foods because it's so devastating to animals and to our health and to the environment. But alcohol is similarly devastating in some ways, and in many ways actually, to animals and to this animal, our physical body, and to other human animals. So I want to go into this a little bit more and say that, first of all, one thing that's interesting is the body will crave something as part of its natural wisdom to keep itself in balance. The macrobiotic people talk about this as contractive substances and foods versus expansive substances and foods. So if we eat too much of an expansive food, and these are called yin foods, then we'll crave something that's very yang or contractive. This is called enantiodromia, how we, running to the opposite, craving the opposite. So if we eat, for example, sweets, which are very yin, we'll crave something very yang, like meat or salt. If we eat meat or salt, we'll crave something very yin, which is, besides being sweets, also alcohol and cigarettes and caffeine and drugs in general are very yin or expansive. So this is not healthy for us to be always gyrating between these two poles of extreme yin and extreme yang. And this is what happens to many people in our society. We eat a lot of meat, and then we want to have a drink. We have some very contractive cheese, then we want to have wine. We eat something very salty, and then we want to have a sweet dessert. And then, of course, the sweet dessert makes us want to have something contractive again. And so the good news is that plant-based foods in general, especially vegetables and grains and beans, are very much in the middle. They're neither expansive nor contractive. And so when we move to a plant-based way of eating for ethical reasons or really for health reasons, we find ourselves now able to solve this problem, actually, and no longer our body will be craving extreme yin or yang unless we eat a lot of sweets, which we can do as vegans, or a lot of salt, which we can do as vegans. Then we'll begin to start craving the opposites. But alcohol, this is the great thing. A lot of people who try to give up alcohol, but they're still eating meat, it's very difficult. They start smoking or start eating a lot of sugar because the body's craving something to expand again. and contract. So this whole idea, I think, is very important to understand. Another essential point here that I want to emphasize is the basic idea that animal agriculture is about exploiting other beings. And when we exploit other beings, it's going to come back to us in some way. This is unavoidable. We absolutely really need to understand that as we sow, so shall we reap. All of the wisdom traditions have emphasized this, and so we have what is referred to as the 5 precepts. In the Buddhist tradition, and really in all the world spiritual and religious traditions and ethical traditions, essentially, the 5 things that we know are ethically wrong to be doing to harm others. And others are not others. Really, others are ourselves. We are not fundamentally separate. We're interconnected. So the 5 precepts are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to sexually abuse, and not to use drugs and alcohol which confuse or weaken the mind, or to encourage others to do the same thing. So with animals, we break all 5 precepts. We kill them, we steal from them, we deceive them, we abuse them sexually, and there's over 10,000 different drugs and hormones and chemicals that are forced on them without their permission. So we break all these precepts, including drugging them, essentially, and then we're not going to escape the net of that. We sow those seeds, it comes back to us, and we find in our society we have a terrible problem with substance abuse. Alcohol, of course, is devastating. And I myself, I remember when I went away to college, I started experimenting with alcohol, and I learned directly, as those of us who have tried it know, that I lost my capacity to control myself very well. Alcohol is a depressant. It's intoxicating, right? It's toxic. We would say, after getting drunk, we'd say we got really polluted. I mean, it's very polluting to our body. It's hard on our liver. It kills brain cells. I mean, it is a toxic substance physically. It's also hard on our mind. It reduces our awareness. And so why would we do that? Why would I do that? I did it because I wanted to fit in, basically. I was new at the college. I wanted to be friends with everybody, the parties, everybody was drinking, so I tried it. Fortunately, I also pretty soon stopped doing it because I realized it was harmful to my body and my mind and to my aspirations. I started reading books that were inspiring to me, and Emerson and Thoreau and the Transcendentalists especially, which led to yoga and meditation and other practices. So I'm so glad that a little bit later, in 1971, is when this was all happening, when I went away to college. And as some of you know, right after college in 1975, I left home and became a vegan, which was, in a sense, part of this. But I gave up in 1971, in 1972, in that time, alcohol and coffee and soda and even television. I haven't done any of those things since about 1971, 72. And in 75, I found myself at a Buddhist meditation center in Alabama, and I took the 5 precepts. In other words, so I made a vow, essentially, not to kill or steal or lie or use alcohol, and I've never done it since. And I always say going vegan came a little bit after that, and it was the smartest thing I ever did besides marrying my wonderful wife, Madeline, who's also a teetotaler like I am. And I just want to emphasize that I'm very grateful for this opportunity, because I think that at the core of our being, we yearn to awaken spiritually and to be a force for healing in the world. And we're born into a culture where we're wounded by eating animal food, where there's enormous amounts of violence and domination and exploitation of animals, of ecosystems, of each other. And so the pain of that makes us want to escape the present moment. And yet this present moment is the greatest gift. This is the only holy moment, is right now. This is the moment we can awaken to the truth that we are. We can go deeper in our understanding. We can experience the joy of being. We can be creative, and we can heal, and we can awaken. And so what alcohol does is it just removes us from this moment. And I understand if we're in pain, we want to be removed from this moment. And there's other ways, though, I think, of escaping or of somehow working with the pain of our life and not just fitting into a toxic situation. one of the most important things is called right association, to associate with other people who we feel good about associating with. If I'm associating with people who are abusing substances, pretty soon I'm going to be doing the same thing. So I think as a movement, as a vegan movement, it's important for us to model behavior of awakening and healing. It's very true. That quite often when we go to vegan potlucks or conferences, people are drinking wine and beer, and the people are at the bar drinking as if this is something that they need to do. And really, as vegans, it's important to understand, first of all, that it's an escape from the present moment that's not necessary. It reduces our capacity of clarity and awareness. And when I'm talking to people who are drinking, I'm not really sure, if they're really them or someone else, quite honestly. And so I don't want to be that for someone else. And secondly, of course, many of the beer and wine and other alcoholic beverages are not vegan. There's isinglass, which is fish bladders that are used to clarify wine and beer, and bone char and other things that are used. And so this is part of the violence of animal agriculture. Animal products are in alcohol. So we can go to websites and we can figure it out and try to do our best to not drink alcoholic substances that are abusing animals, but still underlying the whole thing, there is the net that we're stuck in of avoiding and getting out of the present moment of awareness and reducing our capacities. And the other dimension I think is important to understand also, which is the environmental impact, because when we look at animal agriculture, we see that it's the most devastating thing we're doing to water and to land and to soil and so forth. We live here in the wine country, Northern California, where we have vast monocropped vineyards. And we are very well aware of the devastating impact of these vineyards on ecosystems and on our health. Napa County, right next to us where we live, has the highest rate of cancer in the entire state of California because of the massive amounts of glyphosate, Roundup, and other herbicides and pesticides and fungicides that are routinely sprayed and used on vineyards that end up in the water. There's also an enormous just cutting down and burning of forests, destruction of habitat to grow all these grape vineyards. And we're not eating the grapes. If we would just eat the grapes directly, that would be great. We wouldn't need so many vineyards. But when we convert what could be something healthy, these grapes, into wine, we're creating a toxic substance, and we need huge quantities of it. And the whole economic impact of this is devastating. The medical impact is also devastating. The environmental impact is devastating. It takes a lot of water, enormous amounts of pollution. And this is true of beer also. I mean, there's huge amounts of grain that could feed people are used to make beer and alcohol and wine and so forth. So land, petroleum, and resources and water are used to create essentially toxic substances. And this is the same thing that we understand with animal-based foods. We're avoiding causing suffering to animals and ecosystems by moving to a plant-based way of eating. Why would we not continue that same principle? So eating an organic, whole food, plant-based diet and way of living is the foundation of a healthy society, of healthy individuals, and it's something we can all do. And so I just want to encourage everyone and really challenge, I think, all of us to do the best we can to be a force for healing in the world and for modeling or exemplifying the underlying teaching of ahimsa, of nonviolence to animals, to this body, which is an animal, to all other human beings who can be harmed and who are harmed by alcohol and the ecosystems, and to reduce our environmental footprint as much as we can, and to realize the joy. People are always concerned when we go vegan, we're giving something up. We're giving up meat, dairy products, and eggs. We're giving up zoos and rodeos and circuses. I come along now and say, yeah, I'm giving up alcohol and other toxic substances. But I think the beautiful thing is every time I say no to meat, dairy, and eggs, and wool, and silk, and leather, and to beer and wine and so forth, those are huge yeses. They're yeses to joy and freedom and liberation and sustainability, and to coming into this moment, this precious moment right now, and going more and more deeply. It's well understood, I think, by people who have made an effort that the greatest joy there is in life is to understand ourselves, to understand and take the adventure of what it is to be a human being, to understand our true nature, and from that understanding to do the best we can to bring love and healing and awakening into our world. And so instead of escaping the present moment through abusing substances, to do the best we can to foster understanding and attention and awareness and mindfulness, to be aware. And there's great ways. There's meditation, for example, and some kind of a spiritual practice that you can adopt. Prayer and meditation are ways that we can work with our consciousness. There's creativity. We can use music and art and writing. And there's nature. We can go into nature and connect with the beauty of nature. We can foster healthy relationships. These things, healthy relationships and nature and creativity and meditation, are alternatives to these substances that are so abusive. And we can get therapy. So the whole idea is to learn to question the official narrative in our society that enslaves us, that enslaves animals, that reduces our capacities, that makes our movement weak. We live in critical times. We need a strong movement with people who are awake and aware and mindful and are doing the best we can to understand that every day is a precious opportunity to bring healing to our world and to not fritter away this precious opportunity that we have, because we're only here for a few decades. It goes by very quickly. Do we want to be asleep? Do we want to be drunk with the wine of illusion and delusion? Or do we want to be alive and aware and growing and alert and contributing to a more sane and just society? So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank all of you. It's fantastic and it's an honor to be part of the vegan movement, which is, I think, the most healthy movement in the sense that we're going to the root of the problem of violence and to bring that into every aspect of our lives. So thanks for caring, and I know together we are transforming our world and being part of the solution to the problems here.